start with is, we're going to start with some background information, just to kind of bring everyone back up to speed as to where we were. You all have the handouts in front of you to begin with, so while that's actually loading, I can actually get started. Eden School District, budget status as of today, developing a world-class district in new economic reality. Unfortunately, it's not always as good as we'd like it. Hold on, there we go. There we go. And Christina, how do we get rid of the right box? We'll make it as big as possible. It won't be bad until we get to the last page, and people are going to want it as big as possible. Perfect, thank you. Okay. Okay, let's start with major changes for the budget neutral. As you guys will recall, we had given several reduction scenarios over the past several weeks. In terms of the staffing, this is what the next couple slides will deal with. This is nothing new. We had actually broken out in a couple ways. First, we said, what is budget neutral? What are we looking at in terms of budget neutral? And budget neutral, again, really meant taking some positions, adding some positions. It wasn't necessarily to take care of the deficit, but it was just, again, those things we should be doing every year to say what's the right sizing for the staff. So what we actually looked at for the budget neutral positions, reduction 0.4 FTE gifted and talented, reduction 0.51 family consumer science, reduction in age 1.45, additions 0.3 librarian, 0.5 technology, 0.9 special ed, 0.03 athletic director, 0.34 in PE, and 0.17 in music. Again, nothing new, nothing different there in any way, shape, or form. The reductions, again, nothing new. We've seen this as well. Now, this is, again, to help offset some of the deficit specifically. So reduction 1.558, one bus attendant. We had on there one bus mechanic reduction and replaced to one bus mechanic helper. We've seen an email from Tever, which did come out.
Did everybody get that on the board?
The board got it, I believe, correct?
Okay.
Do you know when that was sent?
Yesterday?
Yesterday? Okay, so we'll address that as well, but this is what was on the original slide, and a reduction 0.4 teacher assistant. Okay. This is new. This I am going to touch on, but Sandy's going to talk about it later when we get to the last screen. So a lot of what's driven some of this here is the student course selection for the junior, senior high school has come in. With the new schedule, kids are really coming out and saying they would like to take more elective classes, which is a wonderful thing. That is what you want. You want student choice. You want them to take as much as possible, so when they get to college, they have tough courses and a variety of courses. They are looking also as attractive as possible for different colleges. One of the things, the first thing that we looked on there is normally in most budgets you will see some shakeout if someone just retiring or some change where you would budget for one teacher retiring. That hasn't happened so far. And this isn't part of the retirement incentive. This is just in general what you would expect. It didn't happen. I need to put it back in the budget because unless something does happen, I have to be prepared that we're paying for everyone who's still here. Planned German reduction, we had looked at, again, a 0.17 reduction. Sandy will talk a little bit more about that, but with the course selection, we're seeing demand there. Library, additional 0.17. The technology, this is nothing new. We talked about this for several times. We had wanted to add back another technology teacher. Again, the budget constraints don't allow us to add new staffing at this time, so that one has been pulled out. And this one, the bus mechanic position, at this point, we would not be able to replace it with the bus mechanic helper position. It just is not feasible for many reasons, and I'm going to let you talk about that when we get to the last slide. So that would be the elimination of that position.
Tom, can I ask a question?
You can.
On this slide here, the librarian with an additional .3 librarian, now we have an additional 1.7. Is
On
this
top
like
of that.
On top of it, okay, so I just want to clarify.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay. Major changes. The first couple ones are going to be nothing new. We've talked about this before. Adjustments to athletics. We've had a couple presentations that were made at the last BAT presentation and board meetings. We hopefully today we'll be able to come to some resolution as to what that will actually look like. Increasing transportation routes to 1 mile and the group stops. There seems to be more consensus on this one, but again, hopefully by the end of tonight, we'll definitively say one way or the other where we're going to be going with that. Since last time, before, not this past Friday, but the Friday before, we had been notified that we would have about a 3.5% reduction in healthcare, which is wonderful. It was about $100,000. Late that Friday, that figure had gone up to about 4.8, which was an additional like 40,000. So total in healthcare savings, and we really do have to thank Blue Cross Blue Shield and also Niagara National on this. They've worked very hard at working with us to lower the rates. I do like to think that we've also worked very hard in trying to get them to lower the rates as well.
Tom, you get the credit for that. You're in the middle of it. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't look at personally, I just, for the district, that I think is a very good thing for all of us. We actually, initially, when this process started, looking anywhere from 10 to 12% increase, they had said 0, so to be at a minus 4.8, we're thrilled. State aid, the runs came out on April 1st. And if you ever look at the runs, it's always fun to take a look at. What they showed, in a nutshell, is this district would be at a net amount, a net gain of about $109,000. But if you took a look at all their pluses and all their minuses, their pluses were about $216,000. Their minuses were about 110. Yeah, somewhere around there. And
that was not listed on the front page of the Buffalo News.
Of course not. But basically, we had actually taken some of the reflections into account even before their run had come out. So we had already planned for that in our revenues. As I said, I always like to budget conservatively, knowing they could take those things away. They did take them away. So really, what we planned in our budget of an additional $250,000 state aid, we are getting $250,000 state aid because I already backed out some of those deductions. So we're exactly where we want it to be, thank God. Would have been less, we would have been in trouble. Okay, now, when you take a look at this figure here, do not panic when you see this. A lot of this we've already talked about. This figure is much lower based on what we've done already. When you take a look into account the use of reserves, when you take a look into account of fund balance, when you take a look at additional reductions. So that figure was our starting point before we get to the next slide. So next slide, I'm going to turn over to, well, yeah, actually, before we get to, we have one. That's it. Okay, so I will turn it over to you.
Questions for Tom before I start?
Yes,
Okay,
couple.
go ahead.
Okay.
So on page, well, it's really the first real page, there's,
Page
which
3.
is the budget neutral.
Yep.
You have a reduction in aids of 1.45, and then the next one, there's another reduction of 1.55, is that in addition to?
In addition,
So
so
we're at
it would have been a
3
total
aides.
of 3 aides. Again, nothing new. We had said that right from the
Okay.
start. The 1.45 was the reduction to get more of a teacher. And then the 1.55 was what we needed as a reduction for budget purposes. So a total of 3. Correct.
Okay, when we first started all this, you had said that even though Blue Cross Blue Shield had said they were coming in with a 0 increase, you budgeted 3% just to be safe.
I did, but then when they put in writing 0, I went down to 0.
Oh, you did?
Of course.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. Once in writing, I can take that.
Okay, well, it's just
Verbal, I
that
won't.
you weren't real sure that they were going to be, I didn't know that they put it in writing.
They sent an email saying, so I had already reduced that, there was a couple meetings ago, I reduced that to 0.
So that's already been accounted for on this year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions before Sandy?
I'd like to know what part on that, on the same page, the budget neutral, When you're talking about athletic director, phys ed, and music, can you elaborate on those a little bit?
Sure, no problem. The athletic director piece, because it's considered a TOSA, or a teacher on special assignment position, is mostly an administrative position. And a TOSA who is mostly administrative positions must carry a .4 teacher position in order to maintain seniority. So we need to adjust a little bit for Marissa's AD position to make sure she's a .6, .4. So that's all that .03 is. It's one class, one day, I believe, to make sure that she can maintain the .4 for seniority purposes in PE. Below that, the .17 music or a .07 or any of those pieces that are additions are to account for a special ed classroom at the elementary school. Every time you add a special class, every time you add a classroom, you have to account for the special areas to go with it. Computers, PE, music, art, whatever that might be. And then some of the additional PE is because we actually are shy in PE this year. And we have one teacher that would have been teaching 7 classes instead of 6, which is quite a heavy burden. And so we're trying to account for that for next year as well.
I still didn't understand the music part.
The music part? So you want to add something to that?
No, the music part is just the offset, since when you add a new position, it has a spin-off effect of other positions as well. Is that
So let's say like at the elementary school, if I'm going to add a first grade teacher, I also have to add art, PE, music, and computer. So a 1.0 teacher actually turns out to be more like a 1.4 or 1.5 when you start to add the special areas in. In this case, we're adding an elementary school special education classroom. The kids still get those specials. Because the teachers can't be with the kids for 7 straight hours without doing some of the elective areas too. Okay. Anybody else before I go? Okay. All right, so the sheet that I'm going to look at is the one that's in more salmon colored, or on the bottom. Some of the board members would have gotten a worksheet from me last night. This is a little bit different from that because there were changes that came our way today. Just to back up for the BAT team, what came forward to the board members yesterday was to take a look at the possibility of a .17 cut in art, a .17 cut in music, a .17 cut in .085 in PE, and just coming straight across all of them because we just could not get to a point that was more zero in the budget. So a couple of different things happened today, and so this is as a result of some of the new stuff today. So coming up at the top, a conversation that is not new, I'm on the line 3, is a cut in 9 teams for JV. This was up on the conversation list last week and possibly the one before. If that were to be approved by the Board of Education, it would be a $51,000 savings. JV Boys and Girls Lacrosse is a new one that's up in front of you. That JV team was not included in the 9 teams above it, so this would be the 10th team now, but this is brand new just today.
Hey, how many JV teams in total?
10.
Wow. So this would be less. How many total JV teams?
Oh, I'm sorry. Where's Marissa? How many JV teams do we have in total?
Take 9, 11, 12 with football. I think it's 12.
So we're talking about cutting 10 out of the 12.
You're talking 11. You said 9, 10, 11 with 2 lacrosse teams. The only one you're not touching is football.
And football because we're working with North Collins. So we're not touching the JV football. So this would be all JV teams then, Marissa? Okay. So the lacrosse is new up on the board today as cuts for boys and girls lacrosse proposed. 1 JV cheerleading coach. Transportation cut, this is not new. This is from our last conversation of a 1-mile radius and central group pickups, having students walk down to Main Street. That's a $97.8 thousand savings. The 10% in extracurricular, excuse me, would be extracurricular clubs. And then right below it, we're proposing an additional 10% on top of that, so a total of 20% coming out of extracurricular clubs. Beneath that is a junior, senior high school musical. There was already a proposal on the table for a 10% cut. The junior, senior high school musical costs us approximately $27,000 to fund. And so if you take a look at these two lines, it would be a total of 30% or 2,700 times 3 as cuts out of the junior, senior high school musical, presumably that they could do some fundraising. The elementary musical, there was already a 10% cut that was up on the table before. The first line is an additional 10%, and the second line of that is another 10% for a total of 30% cut out of the elementary musicals. Below that would be a proposal that I would have for ETA on a continuation of their MOU or an elimination of one department chair. The loss of March 19th as a school day, calling it a recess day, meaning that the district would just be shut down. We would have a total of 188 school days instead of 189. Below that is ETA has to vote, but it's a proposal of cutting their 105H monies from $300 a person who takes it to $150 for a person who takes it, for a total of $19,650. That would be a concession coming from ETA. Below that is a furlough day from the supervisory staff, the administrative staff, from the director of finance, and from me. This is one whole day of non-payment. This is different than the one above it. The teachers don't have the furlough day. The teachers have a 105H proposal. This is a one-day furlough day, but there's not that many of us, so it only comes out to $4,879. That one is agreed upon by the unions. The one above for the ETA must be voted on.
When will we know?
I don't know. That was just proposed today. Below that, Tom alluded to some of these, and so I'd like to go into some detail on the third column over. Neutral reduction still was a .4 gifted and talented program. That one is still on the table as a cut. The .17 German was based on the fact that only 8 students for the current school year had signed up for German 7, assuming that not many more would sign up for next year, when in fact 29 students have signed up for 7th grade German for next year. If in fact there's not a low enrollment, then there was no reason for me to single that one out over anything else for you.
Was that 29 primary first
29
choice or 29 first and second choice?
This is student request, they only get to pick one, so that would be a
Oh,
primary choice.
They actually got
which
to
is-
pick
They
3. They
get to
can
pick
pick
more than-
1,
Well, then I
2,
don't know the answer.
3,
Is Jeff
so-
here?
First choice, second.
Jeff, do you know?
I don't know that answer, but I can find out.
I'm not coming up with more than 120 students, so it's got to be a primary choice.
And is it just the 7th grade?
Yep, 7th grade. So what I have right...
How many kids are in the 7th grade?
What I have right now is for Spanish 1A, 40 students, German 1A, 29 students, and French 1A, 33. So it doesn't come out more than the cohort. So it has to be a primary pick.
Hold on a minute, was it 33, 29, and 40?
40, and we're missing about 10 to 12 kids.
And how many people in that class? It's probably only less than 100.
No.
No, we're at 118. 118. Yeah. So right now, there are 29 students that are asking for German 7. This current class coming up, we're not running German 8, so if in fact German is offered at 7th grade, we have to know that next year we would then be looking at an increase to go back to offering German 8. Okay,
Sandy, didn't have the records for the last couple of years, how many kids
13.
last year? And
8 last year for German 7, mostly 13 kids per class for German, going up to be a little bit smaller at German 4 and German college level.
Did any of the kids drop out or move when they get into
From
high
last year to this year,
school? Like when they got into this fall?
when they get up into German 4 or French 4, yes, they do.
No, I'm talking about the first year. Do they usually hang it out?
Some swing between courses, yeah. I mean, not significantly, but for the most part, German has run at about 13 students, which was why this current year when it fit 8, we just simply said we can't run it with 8.
Will we have to decrease some of the other teachers, like the Spanish or the French, or do we just?
No, because it's a requirement for all students to take a course. What starts to happen, and this is a decision of the district, and it's not something that I can make alone in one night based on budget, is for a district our size where we're looking at a projected enrollment of about 1,300 kids by the year 2016, is can we sustain 3 foreign languages? It's not in 7th and 8th grade when everybody has to take it. It's when they get up into their sophomore, junior, senior year when everybody doesn't have to take a foreign language, so that you end up with the upper level courses with kids truly committed for 3 or 4 years, where there are 7 students in a class, where there's singletons in a master schedule. Would it be easier to run everybody with one language? Absolutely. Is there a thought that all of our kids could take Spanish or French or German, and then at the upper levels you start to swing in another language? You could do that as well. But that's a decision that really should be made by a committee based on a philosophy for the district. Right now, we are running upper levels of German and Spanish with less than 10 students in that. And that won't change over time if we continue to run more than one foreign language. FACS, which is a .51 reduction, some of that is based on enrollment, some of it is not. It's just based on budgetary reasons. Many of these courses do run at max 2 or 3 sections, but some of them are singletons. Every time you have a singleton at the high school schedule, you have constraints. So you're running one section of this and one section of this and one section of this, and truly trying hard to get everybody's requests in, but it's impossible. So if you start with 14 as a request and you're running, let's say, 30 singletons, the chances of even 8 of those kids getting the courses that they want is pretty tough to do. My recommendation over time to the high school principal is that we take a look at singletons and start to run courses alternate years and 2 sections in an alternate year as opposed to 2 singletons every single year, because it's just too difficult to do. It creates too much staggered courses. The .3 library that I think was brought up by Lucinda earlier, when we first look at our regs last year, if you go back into the history of the cut in the library, we had a retirement with Mr. Kibler. At the time, the thought is that the elementaries would take on the full-time librarian and the high school would take on the part-time. When I think it was May or June, when the regs, we actually found them. They're just as incredibly obscure as can possibly be. And when Barb spoke with the state aid representative, she didn't even know her regs, right, Barb? Basically, what it tells you is that if you have more than 700 students at the secondary level, that you have to have a full-time librarian. And so what happened is the elementary schools ended up with the part-time librarian this year, and the high school kept its full-time. For student numbers, as they start to decrease, then you can start to go from a full-day librarian at the secondary level to a .8, let's say, or a .6 or a .5. We have too many students to have a part-time at the high school because they are including 7th and 8th grade as secondary. If it was just 9, 10, 11, and 12, we would be able to have a 4-day librarian at the high school, but we can't because we house 7th and 8th grade here. So Vanessa Zoll, who is our high school librarian, has to be a full-time librarian and can't be anything less. So the recommendation on the table today with that clarification is rather than just a .3 library increase, it's actually a .47 library increase. With the .47 and the addition of what we have currently at the elementary school, it would total a .71 at the elementary school and maintain with just a little bit extra at the elementary school where Mrs. Plotz currently splits her time. So we would have about a 4-day elementary librarian next year, whereas right now we know that we've heard complaints about 6th grade not even having any library. So it doesn't make it full-time, but it's a significant increase from where you are right now.
So that's 4 full days at the elementary?
It would be close to 4 full days. It would be a .71 as opposed to a 1.0. Right now, what you're splitting between GLP and the elementary school is a .70, split with a .43 and a .27. So the elementary school right now has a .27, so that would increase to a .71. The technology, everybody knows our kids would like it. We had 3 full-time teachers. It got cut to 2. Right now, there is no plan to increase that, although the numbers for student requests are definitely there. They are there across the board for tech in many areas. We had at least 40 or 50 students last year who couldn't take courses in tech that they wanted to. If it was a graduation requirement, they got pushed into either studio and art, or they got pushed into chorus, or a different ensemble. We're now going to start stumbling on top of ourselves in terms of graduation requirement for DDP. We are even, our kids like to work with their hands. So that cut in tech is significant.
Last year, you said you had 40 kids requested, and we couldn't.
At least.
And this year, how many are?
We'll have those plus new ones.
Those,
And the
we'll have-
additional more, do you think there might, do you have a number on that?
Maybe 35 to 40. I'm sure it's in here. I haven't
So
counted them up.
80.
It's every year that you don't have that third tech teacher, we will fall behind in offering tech courses that our kids are asking for. So, for example, if I take a look at the numbers, not that all of these courses would have run, okay, and that's why it's a little confusing to look at. But if we take a look at it, we know that we have to offer Tech 7 to 120 students. It's a requirement. Tech 8 to 110 students. They don't run all day, every day, but we have to offer it to them. So you have to figure right now, you already have a full-time teacher that's devoted to just 7th and 8th grade requirements, because that's New York State. So now we have one other full-time teacher that's trying to push out most of the high school courses. There's a request for woodworking, that's 43 students. There's a request of World of Technology, that's 32. A request for developing plastics of 14, electricity and electronics 43, ag tech diesel 26, finishing 14, motorsports 34, vehicle maintenance and ownership 50, design and draw for production, 51, architectural drawing 18, construction drafting 13, and advanced study CAD of 8.
Any of the classes that are being requested, are they at BOCES also, but we can bring the students back here and offer them?
Some courses are being offered at BOCES like CAD, but like that advanced study CAD would be at BOCES, but it would be a full program at BOCES. So right now, we do send kids to BOCES. So like Auto Body 1, Auto Tech 1, Auto Tech 2, Diesel Mechanics 1, Diesel Mechanics 2, Motorsports we offer at BOCES as well.
What I'm looking for is any of those classes, if we brought them back, would that bring money back into the school?
We would have to offer the full program. Okay, so one more than we would offer as a .5 or as a 1.0.
So we couldn't do that.
No, and what happens with BOCES too is while it costs us $8,400 to send a student each year to BOCES, we then get about a what percent back? 53? We get about a 53% back the following year on those students because it's a COSER through BOCES. So cut it in half. So it costs us about $4,200 a year to send a child for a half a day to BOCES. That's more than we can do in a half a day with a staff member.
Do you have a request amount that, okay, bottom line, we gotta have 30 kids ask for it, or it ain't offered? Do you have a number that you use, that you say, okay, we're not going to offer that?
It depends on where that course is. If it's the 5th year of Spanish, and there's only 12 kids asking for it, we're going to offer it anyways because it's a sequence at the top end. If we can co-seat it, like Ceramics 1 and Ceramics 2, we're going to co-seat. And the counselors are really, really good at co-seating. So right now, Ceramics 1 and 2 do co-seat. If we can offer it as an independent study like music theory, and there's only 4 kids asking for it, we'll try to do that as well.
And I don't want to, does everyone know what co-seat means?
We'll put them together in the same period. So Ceramics 1 and Ceramics 2 will run together with 26 kids as opposed to not running Ceramics 2 with 4.
So one teacher.
Do you have the
teaches
numbers
two
for that
classes
class?
together.
For Ceramics,
Yeah, for ceramics 1.
Ceramics 1 is 22, Ceramics 2 is 4. So we would put them together in the same period and have them
Those
teach
are
it
for
together
requests for next year.
for next year.
How many are mandated?
My God.
Studio and art is mandated as an art course. One ensemble or DDP in tech, or studio and art and ensemble would be for art, music, or tech, okay? 3 math, 3 science, 4 English, 4 social studies, half a health, 4 PEs, and get to 22 credits for the most part. That's all that's required, but you got to get to 22, so even though there's only 1 music, you still got to get there somehow. In 7th and 8th grade, it's different. There you have to take different pieces of different things. So you have to offer tech in 7th grade. You have to offer facts in 7th grade or 8th grade. So it's really kind of confusing to say what's mandated, because while studio and art is the only ORC course that's mandated, you have to have enough courses to fill 4 years for kids. And you're not going to get it out of math and foreign language, which isn't necessarily 3 years of requirement, because they could do something different. Okay. Moving on to there are 3 new courses that were floated out there for kids to see if they were interested in taking them. These would fall more within the core areas, so in order for this to happen, the schedule would have to magically work out, and there might be a few classes that are a little bit bigger. One of them is AP Psych. Kids have been asking for AP Psych for a number of years. If in fact we could float it out, there are 29 students who are asking for it to be taught. It would be taught out of social studies. AP Stats is another course that kids really should have. There are 33 students that are asking for AP Stats. I mean, these are not fluff courses at all. Laura, is it you that would teach that?
I'm thinking.
You think it might be if it were to fly?
I have a lot of work ahead of me this
Yeah. So for our kids to want these are tough courses, AP Stats and AP Psych, and then a third one, it's a tough course, AP Stats, is ECC credited Advanced Health, and there are 55 students who are interested in taking an Advanced Health class. So it just depends on whether they float or not, but we just wanted to see what the kids were interested in taking. So moving on beyond that one then, the aides, I think we addressed that earlier, right? That it would be a total of 3 aides that wouldn't be funded. The 1 bus attendant, basically because we don't need the attendant because the student would be graduating. We made a proposal, and I'm going to actually ask Tom to give me some of his figures because I don't know these as well. We made it a proposal to cut 1 bus auto mechanic. We currently have 3. What we felt that what we would need to do would be to replace a bus mechanic with a bus helper. When we started to take a look at some of the statistics in neighboring schools to find out, well, how many buses per mechanic or what's on the fleet, Tom started to get some data back that I don't have, so I'm going to turn it around to Tom.
We did, actually, when our fellow business officials, we will many times shoot out to each other, we're looking at a specific area, what can you tell us about what you're doing in your districts? So an email had gone around, what do you have in terms of mechanics within your district and how many vehicles within your fleet? It's not, really detailed. It's a basic information there. But what's interesting is that they give you more than just basic information. I'll tell you what I'm talking about in 1 second. But what we actually found is that we were on the low end of what the responding districts were in terms of number of mechanics to the number of buses of which they maintain. And if I can actually find that here, we were at basically 11 buses per each of our mechanics. Currently.
With 3 bus mechanics.
Correct. And I wish I can see this right here. There's so many icons on here. Sorry about that.
Do they give comparable ages of the buses too?
And that is, every district has different ages, absolutely. So what they had said is, well, some have older buses, some have newer buses, so the ones with newer buses, doesn't it make sense that they have less mechanics per bus? And the answer to that question overwhelmingly was not necessarily, depends on how you structure the work. And the example they gave is the preventive maintenance. So when you take a look at preventative maintenance for the various functions and parts, that, it's every 3 miles for this, every 15 miles for that, not every district necessarily follows that exact schedule. They will oftentimes do it based on the schedule of the mechanics, what's going on at the time, so you're not always necessarily going exactly to that mileage. What has been found is by not using those preventive maintenance schedules is that that time is taken up doing the preventive maintenance when you don't necessarily need to do it, which of course then equates to less buses you're taking care of because you're doing some other things as well. And they found to optimize is stick with your preventive maintenance schedule. Even if you have an older fleet, they said, yes, you'll have more repair costs, no doubt, but with less preventive maintenance time when you're doing it on schedule, that evens each other out. But some of the districts went up to upwards of 30 per mechanic. So even if we do drop to one mechanic, and we drop one mechanic, that would bring the load up to 17.5, and that was based off of 35 buses. We're not at 35. That is still a reasonable number, even given the size of our fleet, especially when we're going out for a proposition for 2 new buses.
Did they give any details on, okay, we got 30 mechanic or 30 buses per mechanic, but our bus mechanics work 10 hours overtime a week?
No, they didn't talk overtime. No.
So we did, though. We had that conversation, because this has been a topic of conversation for a while, because no matter where we cut, we feel like we're squeezing. So one of the letters that the board members would have received to read from Tebra, who is the CSEA president, was the concern about taking a bus mechanic and creating it into a bus helper, where they would be restricted by their title of what they could or could not do. The other concern is that our bus mechanics do drive, because most of them have a CDL license, and that sometimes we need substitute drivers in order to drive. In taking a look at the figures, it's a possibility that if in fact some of our fleet is old and needed help, that we might be looking at some overtime. But in taking a look at everything that we're talking about in a budget piece and trying to maintain academics for students, because that's important to us, it's a proposal on the table to just simply drop a bus mechanic and not, at this point, replace it with a bus mechanic helper. Then below that, I think I've covered everything.
Well, the last thing that I would mention is just a retirement incentive.
Okay. So we do, thank you. We do have a retirement incentive that is out there. Friday is the date for the full-time teachers to let me know. That's the 11th. And then the 18th is the day for part-time teachers to let me know. We're anticipating on a retirement incentive about a savings to the district of about $25,000. So I would know more of that after Friday for you in terms of who is interested.
Let's figure out how many teachers are...
Well, and let me pick up there. So the retirement incentive is for 3 teachers right now for the incentive to fly. Everything we've heard at this point is we're not sure if 3 teachers would actually take it. So for me to put in as budgeted savings, what it would be for 3 teachers would be, I think, erroneous and also not prudent for the district as a whole.
So you're putting it in as
So I put it in as 1. Whether or not that flies or not is something that is up to the board fully. But it would be unwise for me to put in a figure of 3 when, to the best of my knowledge, we may not get to 3. So between that and also, and I just want to touch on transportation, go back for a second. Transportation was something when we looked at, from the district perspective, from what we're hearing from other districts, and again, looking at areas of possibly to cut. So we just want to make that clear as well.
Can I ask one question? Up here, where you kill the day of school, loss of day, Mark, you mean if you go one less day of school, you save $8,500?
And I would say conversely, like this year, every time we added on another day because of a snow day, we also added $8,500. Yep. That is not including salaried employees. Those are hourly employees.
And that's half a day.
So that's a full day.
That's just
March 19th is a full day.
Okay.
That is
Yep.
hourly employee costs.
That's a day of school or a day of staff development?
This is a day completely where nobody comes into school. So it's a recess day
So it was going to be a student attendance day.
at 189. So we've reduced it to 188, but also stating that we wouldn't be bringing in any hourly employees that day.
Wait, no, the students aren't at 189, the teachers are at 189.
Mhm.
The students are only at 180.
I agree. Well, the students are at 180 with, yes.
But, so if you take away another student day, then they're only at 179.
No, what I'm stating to you, just like this year on the calendar is 188, not 189. Yes, I agree.
Right.
I agree, but that's what I'm also putting on there as well. Students still have to get to 180 no matter what, but on many of our staff development days, we still have hourly employees in the district.
Wasn't the 19th a staff development day? That wasn't a student day, I thought it was a staff development.
That's the only way it would work. If
That's
it
what
was
I
a
thought it
staff day,
was.
you were chucking.
I could be wrong, but I thought it was a staff development day, so
But it becomes 188 on the teacher's end and not
teachers,
189,
yeah, right.
right.
I don't think it impacts students at all that day.
Well, right. because
Well, no, it
would
can't
be
because we're still
underneath
over
the state
180.
requirement.
Right, but these are hourly employee costs
Right.
to us. So it could be a bus attendant, it could be the bus drivers, okay? So salaried employees, it wouldn't make as difference. That actually, we did have 188 on the calendar this year, which saved us in the end.
How many hourly employees do you have? That just seems like an awful low number, $8,500.
It's just hourly people, not
This is
salary
hourly
people.
people.
I don't know what, who and what.
About 100.
Bus driver is an hourly.
Okay,
101.
so what is-
They wouldn't be working on a recess day.
Okay, so
Sometimes they're brought in for, I
What
mean,
about
if we
all
have
of us
full
12 months?
staff.
some of your special ed kids might go.
Some of us that work.
Oh, teachers don't get paid by the hour?
They're not.
No, teachers are
Come
salaried.
in for staff days, they have to get paid. Okay, I get
That
it.
doesn't
Got
take
it.
into
Could be your cleaners are hourly.
Yeah.
That's right.
About that.
You got your cleaners.
Some of us that work all the time.
But you're right, they don't come in every step
Everybody
of the day.
everybody forgets about us that work all the time.
12 months, every
12
day,
months, every day.
every day.
Okay, you want me to go on about the revenues? Okay, so Sandy talked about the spending and the cuts there. Let me talk about the revenues and what we're actually looking at there. From taxes, from non-property tax revenue of 11,842, and taxes 13,277, and that's going up our 1.78 that we've talked about before with the tax cap. We are looking and hoping with Auctions International to start making nominal monies with sale. So we're looking at the sale of a press machine, a photo enlarger, buses, as well as selling advertising. And of course, using, state guidelines in terms of advertising in schools and all that sort of good stuff. Additional state aid, 215, for a total of 25,355, 357. The next line is one that makes me a little uncomfortable. I will not lie. Sandy knows that I've had a little, the tremors looking at this.
I had to take him out to dinner.
She didn't bribe me to push this number up. She was just like, we need to feed you to keep you going so you don't pass out. Fund balance and reserves, looking at $1,041,000. Last year, just to kind of give you a comparison, we were at about $713,000 between the fund balance and reserves.
What was that number again?
$713,000. So it is an increase of about $300,000. And as I said, you've heard me fight for this, and we need to do it, and I understand because we have to budget the balance the budget. When you increase your use of fund reserves and the fund balance and the reserves, you become dependent on that. We are increasing by $300,000. Next year, we'll have to look at maybe some other areas that we'll actually have to address, but continued reliance on use of fund balance and reserves means every year you're starting in that hole. So I just want to at least give a comparison. So last year, as an example, we used about $150,000 in reserves, and the rest was in what we had in fund balance. So I'm planning about the same fund balance this year. It would really, in effect, bring our reserves up another $300,000 from last year. Can we do it? Yes. Is it always the smartest thing? Not always. Is it necessary? Sometimes it is. So, it's once you get to over that million, I start getting nervous on that. So that's why I pointed it out repeatedly. We're doing it because we obviously do need to balance the budget. That is also in consideration with everything that was listed above. All these things need to play. If the things above don't happen, I would not bump up the fund reserve, fund balance and reserves much higher than what is now, because then we get into a little dangerous territory.
So let me jump in for a minute here. The entire budget, for the most part, this year, all of our conversations have been major attempts to preserve academics for kids. I mean, that you can see that as we go. We have hit everything except. We have hit our support staff. We have hit our extra programming. We have hit our sports, our transportation, our musicals, all of these pieces in an effort to preserve the academics for students. People who have heard me speak know that I am more concerned about next year than I am this year. In addition, when we take a look at our enrollment projections for next year, and thank you, Lucinda, for doing this for me, what we have this year is an approximate enrollment of about 1,534 students. Next year, our projected enrollment is 1,472, which is about 50, 60 student difference if you take a look at it overall. When you go to the following year, we're down to 1421, which is another 50 students. So it's going to become more and more difficult for us to do two things over time: to justify the number of staff that we have as we continue to lose 50 students each year, but secondly, to make big decisions regarding our vision of academics for students, i.e. all of our electives, all of our sports, all of our foreign languages, our computer classes, all of that, as we become what is known as a small school. So already North Collins Superintendent and I have started some conversations, and we know with football that we've looked to do some consolidation, but we will have to step that up. But also because the governor's tying our hands and trying to do some consolidation. I'll let you talk about that 1% for a minute, because that's a lot of money right off the bat. But so I wanted to lay that out there, that as difficult as it looks this year, I am more concerned about next year, just simply because we won't have these things to look at again. If you're already pulling 30% out of musicals, you're not going to pull another 30% next year. If you're already looking at students walking a mile this year, you're not going to look at them walking 2 miles next year. So we're going to have to look somewhere else to take it. I think the piece that Tom was talking about, as you look down this salmon-paged lines, all of this takes us to a use of fund balance and reserve that is higher than we've ever used.
I don't know about ever.
I think it's higher, it's definitely higher than last year and higher than the year before. So if in fact the decisions that are made tonight don't include everything on here, the only other place to go is to cut staff, academic staff, because we can't find any other place to come from.
How
Do you
much
want-
is left in the bank then?
That would still leave us with our 4% fund balance that we're allowed to have for unassigned at this point.
What is it?
It's about $1 million, which is not a lot. Yes, about a little over $1 million, yes.
So Sandy, what you're saying is probably right on the numbers that next year, if the disaster doesn't hit next year, the year after,
Well, we're already starting in the hole because we're using the reserve for about, what, $450,000, $500,000. You know, so day one, we're already in the hole regardless of what increases we incur next year because of salaries, benefits, all that
Just because
stuff.
of where we're taking it from. So now let's talk about the governor's budget for a moment. Can you talk about that 1%?
Sure. What the governor is actually proposing is that he wants school districts to stay under the tax cap. Again, nothing new. We've heard this before. And so far, for the most part, the governor has got what he wants. So he is proposing on theirs to say that for districts that stay under the tax cap, and for us this year it's the 1.78, that they would cut a check to taxpayers. I don't know what the amount's going to be, but as an incentive, saying thank you very much for staying under the tax cap that you would get for next year. The year after that, he steps it up. And again, in terms of the language and how it's actually going to play out, it's a 1% savings, a 2% savings, and a 3% savings, and that's for consolidation.
So
How
what
that
percent
savings,
is about?
it could be a $100,000 savings in the 15-16 school year. Depends on what the language looks like when it's actually adopted, but it's the 1%, 2%, 3% savings
So
from
that's an
consolidation.
extra 100,000 that we already know we need to reduce in order to make this happen, on top of everything else.
Correct. And we don't know what the tax cap rate would be next year. It could be lower. It doesn't, it started at 2%. That's what it was touted as, a 2% tax cap. This year it's 1.78. We don't know where it would be next year. So it'd be let's say it's 1.78 again, less the roughly $100,000 for consolidation, whatever that consolidation figure would be. So it wouldn't be 1.78, be lower.
Did our Eden district used to be 2%?
We were at 1.99 last year.
Our cap, do you know what it was before then?
What was it?
Cap was 2.99.
Cap is 2.99.
So Barb, our cap last year was 2.99. We went out at 1.99.
And the reason why, again, for many districts, even the cap wasn't always 2%. That perception was out there of a 2% tax cap. But again, there were exclusions that all districts were able to have that say, okay, it's 2%, but not really, because you can take pilots out of that figure. You could take increases in the retirement system over 2%. You could take that out of there. So there were all these things you could take out, which made that 2% higher. So it was for us, 2.99. Many districts said, okay, even though we can go to 2.99, or some districts are 4.58, some were at 10, many chose to stay under at 2. And the reason why, this is personal opinion, again, the governor's PR piece did such a great job of putting that 2% out there. Most people didn't understand what 2% meant in the exclusions, that most districts were afraid to go over 2% because people weren't sure what that meant and that they were allowed to. So even though you could, most said, we better stay at 2 because people are going to vote it down.
But I'm not seeing that this year.
No, I think people now are realizing much more what the tax cap means, because now it's been around longer. But on the flip side, what I would say is, people now, if you're going to get a check in your house, I'll guarantee you're going to make sure that your district is not going to go over that tax cap, because you're going to want to get a check at home. So, you'll look and find out, okay, what's a tax cap? It's 1.78. Okay, if they're going for 2, I'm going to vote it down. So there is definite now pressure.
Were there any districts last year that tried to go over?
Oh, absolutely.
And made it?
No, every
all
district that
failed?
tried failed. They had to go to revote, and I don't believe every district
But
passed.
two.
Yeah. So there were some that were on a contingent budget because they didn't pass a second time. There are some districts this year who are going above 2%, not because they're choosing to go above the tax cap, but with their exclusions, like Niagara Wheatfield is 4 point some. And they're going up to the limit because of their economic conditions. They're not staying at the 2 because they can't afford to. So they're trying to educate the community and why it's over 2.
And why are they in so much trouble?
They overspent. And the state's, I'll say it nicely, the state says you cannot have a deficit spending. They did. And it caught up with them, and they got in trouble for it, and they had to work out a plan to dig the hole. One year they said, we want to raise taxes 10%. The community said no. And I only bring that, I know that district, so that's why that one, and was such a well-known one in the public.
There is no credit card.
There is no credit card. It used to be, back in the day, we're talking 10, 20 years ago, you'd be able to borrow money to float you until you got to the new year. Well, the auditors and, OSC got wise to that and said, no, that's just your way of running deficit spending and keeping it rolling year after year after year. Can't do that. They cut that off. So it's new rules that we play with. You have to have a zero budget. Here, we have a zero budget. If you look at that bottom line, doing all that stuff, you're at 0. You're exactly where you need to be in terms of expenditures equal your revenues. We've
But
done.
the board has to agree.
The board has to approve it. The board has to say yes, no. If there are adjustments, we need to find out where the adjustments would come from. But again, it is a plan that balances, let's put it that way, and that has the least amount of impact on staffing that we could. And student programming, which was our number 1. Yes, Barb?
As far as the revenues goes, money coming back in, if we did have 3 teachers retire, we would have to pay out the $30,000 for them to retire, but we would assume maybe $20,000 or $30,000 each that we would hire
Yes, we figured in lower costs for new teachers if they were being replaced.
So in reality, if we had 3 retired full-time, we could save an additional $60,000.
In its simplest form, yes. But there are other factors you have to keep in mind, because a teacher, if we offer for CSA, whoever we offer to, if they go out, they get another job, and they get laid off, your last 2 employers basically are responsible, so we'd be on the hook for some unemployment costs potentially too.
And it also depends on whether we're replacing that position or not. So if it's a position that we wouldn't replace, then the higher savings comes back to the district. If you have to replace it because it's a kindergarten teacher or a 5th grade teacher, then the savings are there, but they're not as high for us. You'll see many districts in the newspapers going out for teacher incentives right now for this very reason. Whether they believe in one or they don't believe in it, they're trying to find creative ways to bring in a revenue. And if they can use their EBLAR, which is their accrued liability and not their fund balance to do it, then they feel like they're grabbing the money out of another place.
And one thing I would definitely say here, and I think that you see this from every single unit here, everyone has proposed giving up something here, every unit. And I've been in districts, I have not seen that. So from that, I'm very impressed in this district that everyone is willing to play a part. And, we should be, for that part, very fortunate. It'd be greater if we had all of our state funding and didn't have to worry about it, but it's not the case. So I just wanted to point that out. I thought that very good of every unit. And now I know that we're going to discuss this at the board meeting. Any other questions from the BAT members? Yes. Mrs. Feasel.
The first time I asked this, you didn't know because it was still too early in the year, but the surplus from this year,
Yeah, I'm planning about 500,000.
500,000, and that money is going to,
The budget.
it's already put in the,
Or that
so
million.
all of it's going to knock down the budget?
All of this. Now, if we get over the 500, we can then put some back into the reserves to pay them down a little, because we're using them this year. And I hope if we get lucky, but given what we had this year, may not be the case. So it's probably.
You could put it into buying the buses so that you get the state aid back right
That would be
away.
the first thing we do.
You could buy some technology, which we certainly know that we're very, very shy on. You could roll it over into next year's fund, or you could put it into the reserves.
I have a question maybe for Marissa. As far as the sports go and all the cuts here, so the teams, I missed the meeting, so I just want a clear understanding. The teams are going to be 7th through 9th?
7 to 8 for modified, 9, 12 for varsity.
9 through 12 for varsity. Okay, so how about, I know cheerleading's personal because my daughter's a cheerleader, but does that change also too as far as their competitions and that type of thing? How would that work?
It wouldn't change, it would still go down as, we'd only be offering a varsity program. And because technically cheerleading is listed as a club right now, they don't have to do all the same regulations that a regular team right now recognized by New York State would have to do. They would probably be a larger squad, so they would enter into the larger squad classification.
Okay. So we would not offer modified or JV cheerleading?
We don't offer modified right now as it is. We only fund one of the JVs, and we would no longer do that.
So the 9 to 12 like all the rest probably.
I did not hear the comment.
It would probably be 9 to 12 like all the rest of
It
them?
would be 7 to 12.
The cheerleading would be 7 to 12 with
There's no
one coach?
age- There's no age requirement, there is no roster size, there is,
With one coach?
yep.
Okay.
Other questions?
Just correct me if I'm wrong, regarding next year and this rebate that the governor is talking about. In order for the rebate to take effect, not only would be that the school district would have to stay under the cap, but it includes the municipality as well.
It does.
Correct?
As far as I'm aware.
That's what I'm aware of, and most municipalities have already approved going over the tax cap if they need to.
That's my point.
Yes, absolutely.
When it comes to the actual taxpayer, their voice affects us
Yeah.
as a school district. It doesn't really affect municipality.
No, because they don't need a
Because you've got
vote.
board members that approve a budget.
Yeah.
That's
So if those 4 or 5 people that sit on that board say, well, we can't afford to do this, we're going over the tax cap, there goes your rebate.
They don't need 4 or 5, they only need 3.
Yeah.
Well, whatever it is.
No,
that's the
that's a
point.
very good case in point, and I have not seen one that has voted it down so far. They've already approved it just in case. Absolutely.
But David, think about this. And it's a great point that you bring up. The school budget is the only budget taxpayers in this country have a chance to voice their complaints or upsets with government on. Like you said, even with the town or the village, that can be voted on without, again, the public directly voting on the budget. We don't vote on the federal budget, we don't vote on the state budget, so this is the one chance. And if they don't get the rebate checks, will everyone understand it was because of the town or village? Maybe not. Or will they come back to us and say why? And again, part of that I think is by design by the
there's no
state
doubt.
as a way to make school districts look bad. Again, personal opinion, but it
Well,
doesn't help us.
for me, I believe it's to change the face of public education as we know it. It's to break unions. It's to give choice to parents with charter schools. It's to not have strong unified groups where you have people pitted up against each other. It could be any groups. It could be pre-kindergarten parents. It could be veterans. It could be anybody. But it will definitely change what we know of as public education in New York State.
They just don't define what they want,
Yes, the governor has defined that he would like to see the number of school districts cut in half.
They're a little-
By going regional, there are about 648. So, yeah, let's say about 650 districts across New York State. He would like to see them cut in half and the school districts be regional or consolidated. So, for example, saving money for the state of New York. So if North Collins, Eden, Lakeshore, possibly Silver Creek, maybe Gowanda all became a regional component. All the Cheektowaga schools a regional component. Maybe even take a smaller school in the North Country and make it a charter school. The funding formula becomes different right off the bat.
But how does he know, or they know, that it's going to save money?
When you talk about state aid to school districts, you could talk about that.
No, not state aid. How do they know it's going to save money if you push them, because you're going to have less administrators?
Well,
You're gonna have
because,
less teachers, you're gonna
Because they
less
don't pay for
kids.
administrators. It's the funding to the school districts.
right, I mean,
It's the state aid that they might give to a district. If you take a really poor district, let's say like a Mount Morris, Mount Morris might be 90-95% aidable. And so that's coming straight out of the coffers of the state of New York. You put them together with a school district adjacent to them that's not as high up in terms of aid, the state automatically makes some money. Or saves some money would be more accurate. Is that how you would word it, or would you word that differently?
yeah, I would definitely say that's part of it. I mean, it's, you will have less people in the system ultimately as well, because you will have retirements and just less money as a whole.
And, I mean, the governor's not just looking at school districts, he's looking at everything.
Yeah,
Oh, you're
that's very true.
absolutely right. Mike, villages, yeah.
Yep,
That's
very
why it's
true.
hitting the municipalities too.
911 centers. I mean,
Yep.
The village and the town, you're absolutely right.
He's looking to-
Short of consolidation, what is it that will drive up our state aid ratio?
That would drive up our state aid ratio. We've talked about a couple things. For instance, free and reduced lunch population. We increase that. Again, we're at 18% right now. I think that figure is artificially low. I think we have a higher rate. So if a lot of our aid is based on our poverty ratio, free and reduced, if that were closer in reality to 25 or 30%, we'll get more state aid. The buses, again, we get aid on the buses as well. So if you're not managing your credit, the state's not giving you money back. So you're then paying for repairs on buses and getting no money from the state for it.
Capital project.
Capital projects, you get aid back as
You
well.
get some debt service.
So there's a lot we can actually do to maximize, or more that we can do to maximize.
One time we talked about doing a census again.
Yes.
Is that still something that's being
Bless you.
considered?
And I think as part of the potential capital project, that is definitely.
would do a census.
We would have to.
But we are, just in terms of trying to get our free and reduced lunch rate where we believe it ought to be, is really doing a full-out outreach, because if we're at 17% in Tom's prediction, he's good at predicting, I find. I don't know, it's closer to 30%, he's thinking it's worth $1 million to us. It's a lot of money.
We won't get it to the following year,
No,
but
that's a lot of money.
Born in Lilydale or what?
He's got this thing about predicting numbers, I don't know what that is.
NCAA tournament, did you have UConn winning?
no, I chose not to gamble on that. I hold my money very carefully.
Kentucky.
All right, any further questions before we go?
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
I look at the list and I see the cuts and it's like, ouch, 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 ouch. There's only one up there that doesn't say ouch to me. And I know this is gonna sound really bad, but like, we have next year 9 full staff development days and 7 half staff development days. And I would be more than willing to concede 3 more days, 2 recess days, to save the district $34,000. Just saying. It's a good savings. We have a lot of staff development days. We could give some back.
Are they
Hey.
mandated?
Hold on a minute, your union rep over here might not.
It's $8,500 for every day. I'm seeing new savings. And we can put the department chairs back in that we need.
So let me just stop her from laughing just a little bit here. Understand that the half days are counting as a student attendance day.
Right.
Okay? And that the full days are there to save us in case we have snow, too much snow. So while we are taking a look at right now, I think we're at 181 for our students or so. I think there's 7 possible snow days built into the calendar for next year, coming off of full staff development days and turning them into half days. That's exactly right, yeah. And after this year, I'm gun shy, I gotta tell you.
And for the board meeting, I'm going to leave this up here, this last sheet.
Are we
Thank you,
dismissed?
everybody.